And again, we were getting into the immigration issue. This is meant to demonize anybody who's not for totally open borders. Take the United States. The Ford Foundation brings in millions of illegals. They have millions and millions more children. And then an American flag at a public school in Texas or California is so evil that you have to take the American flag off. I mean, that's on record. And I didn't mean to get off into that area, but during the break I was talking to Jim, and he gave us a statistic. Give us that number, Jim.
In 2010, there were 4.2 million Mexicans immigrated into the United States.
Jim, start over. We didn't have you faded up. Start the statistic over again.
Okay. Between 2000 and 2010, 4.2 million Mexicans immigrated into the United States. Doesn't really specify whether this was legal immigration or illegal immigration. But the point is that in that same 10-year time period, there were 7.2 million babies born to these Mexicans living in the United States. And if they're legal, fine. But the problem is when you open the immigration floodgates wide, then what was once a reasonably homogeneous society becomes fragmented, and then you have these calls, for, raise the Mexican flag or raise some other flag, and this completely destroys the homogeneous.
Well, that's what the globalists want, Jim, as you know.
Exactly, that's the plan.
Well, I mean, they admit that that's the plan, and to expand on that. The illegals are proud of Mexico. That's the majority. And, just like at the soccer game in Southern California, even 80% of the people cheered, the Mexican team and booed during the Star-Spangled Banner.
But see, this is just totally out of whack. Let's go back and look at all of America, except for the natives, of course, are immigrants. All of us came from somewhere else. But in the great immigration thrust of the late 1800s, you had people coming from Poland and Germany and Italy and, all these countries. And they were proud of their heritage. They were proud of their country.
Yeah, being proud of heritage is good.
That is good.
But then hating America.
Proud of their country. But if you're going to come to America, you need to do like the immigrants of the 1800s. You need to assimilate. You need to learn the language. In fact, so many people, particularly from Eastern Europe, would come over here and they'd have these unpronounceable names, Polish and Czech and all like that. And so they changed their name. And then they pledged to be good Americans. And in World War II, you had Japanese Americans, you had German Americans, Italian Americans fighting tooth and toenail along with everybody else. These are Americans, okay? That nobody said you're supposed to come to this country, ask for all the benefits of being American, and then spit on the flag and say that your flag needs to be raised higher than the United States
well,
flag.
Look, Jim, you're right. Well said. It's national suicide. But that's the issue. It is the Ford Foundation. It is the U.S. government. They are globalist. They want to break down our sovereignty, so they're importing a very nationalistic group in, telling Americans not to be nationalistic, so they can later break up the country, and that is the essence of globalism. I want to come back for 5 more minutes with you, Jim, and get back into Knights-Templars. What do you make of the news reports that he was on drugs and that he was meeting with, quote, powerful people in England?
Well, I think that, coupled with the idea that the police knew who he was even before the gun smoke had settled, tells me that there is an underlying story here. The drug thing, of course, this is something I've been screaming about for years. One thing that everyone is sincerely concerned about are these school shootings, and yet when you go back and study it, almost every...
Stay there. Let's talk about school shootings. We're back in 1 minute with Jim Mars. I'm Alex Jones. Geeks... I don't mean the popular definition of a geek, somebody with broken spectacles on with a pocket protector, but real geeks, or people at fairs that would bite the heads off of chickens and things, and do other demeaning things to themselves so that other people watching it could feel good about themselves. Glenn Beck is a geek. He came out and said that the teenagers that were killed, he compared them to Hitler Youth. He said that they had disturbing similarities to the Nazi Party's notorious juvenile wing. And I'm seeing some of this out there with the mainline neocons. Almost, I see the comments praising this shooter, Jim Mars. I mean, this is absolutely despicable. I mean, this guy really shows us who he is, and I don't want to get into a Glenn Beck bashing fest. It's just that he does this to just get attention, but I'm seeing other neocons embracing Breivik. What's your view of that?
Right. Well, you know what, actually, and I think it's good that you're focusing on this Norway incident, because I think this is a microcosm of the ideological struggle that's going on today, and of course they try to keep everybody separated, and, you've got the Christian right allied with the Zionists against the Muslims, against the progressives, and yet, there's threads of truth all the way through there, but when you try to unravel that and try to tell the truth, then, you end up, being thrown into one category or another and styled as an extremist. I don't know. We need to just watch this carefully and start separating the fact from the fiction, but you can see the spin machines are already in high gear.
Well, you're right. Briefly, getting into drugs, and you were talking about school shootings.
Right. This is a subject that's, of course, of concern to everybody, as well it should be. And yet what I've found out, once you start digging into it, is that virtually every single school shooter, and this includes the rise in teen suicides, involves psychotropic drugs. And, of course, the mass media, the corporate media, will never tell you this because they don't want to antagonize one of their largest advertisers. But the only reason I can't say that every single school shooter was involved with these psychiatric drugs is the fact that they have hidden away, blocked, and censored some of their medical records, such as Cho, the gunman at Virginia Tech. But we were told in Cho's case that he was under psychiatric treatment, which means undoubtedly he was probably being given psychiatric drugs, but we don't know that for certain because they've sequestered his medical records.
And now the Norway shooter was hopped up on a bunch of stuff.
Exactly. That seems to be coming out, too. And, of course, you realize back at the first of this year, the leading cause of death in the U.S. military was not war-related, it was suicide. And that was because they're all being medicated with these psychiatric drugs.
Well, obviously they're being medicated, and then the psychiatric drugs make them more suggestible. Right. Also, the Prozac class drugs destroy your inhibition, and that's why every mother you hear about killing their little kids is always on these drugs.
That's right. They're always involved. And by the way, have you ever thought about this, Alex? If you want to be dulled down and take chemicals to get through the day, then you want some Prozac, okay? Which, by the way, the scientific name is fluoxetine, the technical name, fluoxetine, because it's predominantly fluoride. But now, consider this. If you want to take Prozac, you got to go to a licensed physician. You have to get a prescription so that you can get this fluoride-filled drug. And yet, if you live in two-thirds of the United States where they fluoridate the water, you have non-medical people
well said.
pumping fluoride into your drinking water.
JimMars.com. Thank you, Jim. Very well said.